George Esveldt's joining us for the first time, and I'm sure glad. His resume reads like this: 34 years in Bristol Bay.
The Gas Boy. In 1963, 55 years ago, I flew to Bristol Bay, Alaska for the first time, freshly graduated from South Bend High School, just up the road here. My father managed an oyster cannery on Willapa Bay and had secured a job for me as a gas boy at Queen Fisheries, a large, old-school salmon cannery on the Nushagak River. The cannery's owner, chief engineer, and best fishers were all stern, confident Norwegians. The gas boy was expected to supply fuel from a barge moored at the cannery's dock to the cannery itself and to any fisher who marketed to the cannery. Anytime fuel was needed, no matter what else was happening. In one very long June day, I leapt from high school to the moon. I had undeclared crushes that summer on two young women at the cannery. One was the blue-eyed daughter of the cannery's chief engineer, who worked as an office assistant to the cannery superintendent. The other woman was a charming, gracious baker who set out huge platters of fresh, hot, glazed donuts 3 times a day in the mess hall. All you could eat. In 6 weeks at Queen Fisheries, I added 15 pounds to my skinny-ass body. I became best friends with an assistant cannery engineer named J.D. Smith, who took it upon himself to look after me at crucial junctures during the season, guardian and mentor of my very green behind. J.D. told me on several occasions he had been a hotshot halfback on the University of Oklahoma football team in the late 1950s until a serious knee injury had ended his athletic career, a fact which J.D. never seemed to get over the sadness of. I bunked in a room with 3 other greenhorns across a hallway from a room that J.D. shared with another cannery engineer. Sometimes, late at night, J.D. and his pal would open the door of their room and from reclined positions on their own beds, gleefully hurl empty whiskey bottles across the hallway at the closed door of our room, hoping best case for a spectacular collision between a flying glass bottle and our metal doorknob. Occasionally, their aim was true. I wish I had stayed in contact with J.D. I still miss him. Norwegians managed Queen Fisheries in the way Bristol Bay processors had run their canneries for decades. The canning itself was performed exclusively by Filipino workers who ate Filipino food at separate tables in the mess hall and slept in what was called the Filipino bunkhouse. In the dumbness of youth, as the civil rights movement was finally gaining traction in cities across America, it never dawned on me to question the morality of this labor hierarchy. In the same way, it never occurred to me to ask why Alaskan natives at the cannery seemed grouped together in tiny, shabby shacks at the far edge of cannery property. In my summer as a gas boy, all salmon processed by the cannery ended up in so-called pound-tall tin cans that were consolidated in sturdy cardboard boxes, 24 cans to a box, for shipment to Seattle. The initial step of the shipping process entailed moving boxes from the cannery dock's edge to a flat barge. Following tradition, boxes were slid from the dock down the barge, to the barge down long wooden chutes. Standing on the barge, the important thing to do was catch each downward sliding 24-pound box on the chute before it crashed onto the deck of the barge. This was easy enough to do at high tide when barge and dock were near level with each other. But as the barge fell away from the dock on an ebbing tide, the angle of the chutes grew steeper, with the boxes hurtling down the chutes at ever higher velocity. Catching those boxes before they crash landed on the barge's deck not only signaled the end of another season in the bay, but also felt oddly to me like a rite of passage to manhood. What I remember most fondly about my season at Queen Fisheries was being part of a world far larger and grander than I was. If only for a few weeks, I loved being one of all people, of many people, all bent intently on accomplishing a single goal. As quickly as possible, get the fish in the can. I loved the urgent choreography of salmon canning, the metallic clacking of machinery, the perfume of cooked salmon, the shouted warnings to watch out behind you. When 500,000 pounds of perishable fish arrived at the cannery's door, it was all hands on deck. Can all day and can all night if you have to. Can around the clock for a week if you have to. It was a marvelous pageant, rehearsed for decades, full of pain and exhilaration, a spectacular drama. Yes, everyone was there to make a wage. But what I thought about sitting in the mess hall at 3 a.m., gulping down black coffee and donuts on a 15-minute break, gazing into the bleary eyes of my worn-down coworkers, was not money, but how people can work together so tenaciously and so cooperatively to achieve a single good thing. Some of the salmon delivered to the cannery that year had arrived by tender from Big Creek Fisheries, a fish buying company located in the Igigik River Fishing District, 60 miles across the bay from Queen Fisheries. I have no memory of who said what to whom had my father intervened again. Somehow I ended up at Big Creek the next summer fishing a leased set net site. Maybe, I don't know, I had seen something that first year at Queen Fisheries. Maybe the way those Norwegian fishers strode so confidently across the cannery dock that set me to wondering whether I should become a fisherman too. I did become a fisherman, fished a gillnet drift boat on the Igigik River for the first time in 1965, fished for 31 more seasons on the same river. Big Creek Fisheries was located on the shore of a wide, shallow creek which flowed into Bristol Bay near the north boundary line of the Igigik Fishing District. Maybe you've been there yourself. The camp was founded in the mid-1950s from scratch on frozen tundra by a man named Claire Clark, who ruled his camp with absolute authority, as a feudal lord might have ruled his fiefdom in 9th century Europe. From the late 19th century to the middle of the 20th century, Bristol Bay fishers were basically piece rate employees of processing companies, as many in this audience well know. They fished company-owned nets on company-owned boats, slept in company-owned bunkhouses, ate in company-owned mess halls. Processors set the price of salmon, fishers took it. It was a company town model of salmon harvest. The model was dumped on its head in 1951 when fishers were finally allowed to motorize drift gillnet boats. With motorization came mobility, the opportunity to fish your own boat wherever you wanted to, and push processors to compete for your catch by offering higher prices. At Big Creek, Claire preferred the older company town model of salmon harvest. He recruited a mix of Alaskan natives and young men like me to fish his nets and skiffs, housed and fed us, sorta, and routinely took 1/3 of our catches to cover his expenses. Claire was hard to take at times, an unpredictable bearcat. But I'm also deeply indebted to him for giving me the opportunity to become a real deal Bristol Bay gillnetter. Claire paid, usually, a competitive price and never stiffed me at the end of a season. Always kept his word. He carried his fishers, through hard winters, financed their shortfalls. Big Creek transitioned over the years from a buying station to a processor, initially canning, later freezing salmon, and over the years, as times demanded, grew away from being a company town. I went independent in 1978, bought myself a fancy new skiff, built my own cabin on the tundra. Big Creek changed hands numerous times, but I never left her. The pluses always outweighing the minuses. I delivered the last sockeye I ever caught in Bristol Bay in 2001 to the same company, Big Creek Fisheries, that I had delivered my first sockeye to in 1964. Fishers are sometimes portrayed as careless destroyers of the natural world, as merely crass harvesters of natural bounty. I went to Bristol Bay as an 18-year-old. I spent 34 seasons there. What I learned about fishing is this. It's really not about destroying the natural world, but about learning to read it, as hunters and scientists do, respecting its awesome power, accepting the sovereignty of nature with humility, and conserving for others the opportunity to have an adventure like mine. Sockeye fishing in Bristol Bay is clearly sustainable if there's a political will to do it. Maybe the grace that entered my life while fishing came with gradually understanding that I was a force of nature myself, seamlessly meshed with the wind and water and fish and all the rest of it in an infinitely large, wondrous, and mysterious universe. There is comfort in thinking of yourself not as alone in a malignant cosmos, but as an integral part of some kind of miraculous wholeness. I don't know. Go buy a boat, go fishing, come back someday and tell me what you discovered. Thank you.